Well, firstly, I think we all want to thank Gidio and Giuseppe for organizing this, and especially for inviting Carlo Petrini to speak, because I think that was great. And I mean, in English you say follow that, which means how do you follow? But anyway, so we will follow it, and I think it was a very, very good kind of agenda setting start, kind of setting the bar as well for kind of where we need to get to, where we want to get to, what the challenges are. So I want to welcome everybody to the conference, and we're very, very pleased to have all of you attending. I'm representing the Sustainable Food Policy Planning Group from within Aesop, which is the Association of European Schools of Planning. I'm currently the chair of this group. This is the 7th conference that we've run since 2009, when we started in the Netherlands, and has operated as really a kind of community of practice up until this stage, which has really been a great strength for us. Now, I thought I would tell a little story, which slightly reminded me why we were coming here, but equally the presentations earlier reminded us as well. But when Howard Lee and I were coming over here on the plane a couple of days ago, we each decided to celebrate by having a ham and cheese croissant. And Howard then read the label on the back, and there were two things that struck us. I mean, one fairly obvious, that's a list of ingredients for our croissant. But the thing that shocked me more was Howard looked at the expiry date. And the expiry date is September 2016. And then we read a little label here which says, please store at minus 18 degrees centigrade. And it just kind of brought home the kind of complete craziness of the system that we know. But you know, to imagine that this is from this is from Ryanair actually, you know that these things can be sitting for a year, frozen at minus 18 degrees centigrade. I mean, I don't know when they produced it, because anyway. So we kind of know this context, and we know that it's a big problem and that it's a really difficult issue to deal with. But at the same time, I think within this group we are trying generally to do things, to be active. And so we are actually pleased to have been here as part of the Milan Expo, because that's kind of opened some opportunities. And I think the kind of the scope of issues, of course, that are meant to be dealt by the Expo just reminds us of what we're trying to deal with. So yesterday, we actually started this event with two activities, that both of which especially please us as this Aesop group. The first was a PhD student and new researchers workshop, which started yesterday, which ran 3 workshops, and these will be reported back on Friday, tomorrow. But this group is really, really important to us, because it's part of the way of kind of building pathways to the future for research. So that was super important. The other thing that we really enjoyed yesterday was going to the expo for a round table about a 46,000 hectare Milano South Agricultural Park, this big park that runs around the south of Milan. And we like this because as this community of practice, we are really interested in trying to deal with these real world issues. And also we believe quite fundamentally that food and food-related spaces have a great significance in cities. Actually, and the one thing that keeps falling off the agenda, I think, in the discussions is this idea of space. Actually, in the keynote, everything was discussed, why food is important, but the actual spatial urban part wasn't flagged up, and that's a very important part for us, what these spaces would do within a city. So from the workshop yesterday, or the round table, there were some major concerns came out, and I think some of them are quite useful ideas to have in the back of our mind for the rest of today. So one of the issues there was that the park, although it functions, and it functions agriculturally, there was sort of a general sense that it wasn't achieving the potential that was there. So it's functioning but not achieving its potential. And many issues were discussed, but two major ones came up as reasons to why this might be the case. So one is that agricultural policy and the food cycle, the whole food system, are not coordinated. They sit separately. And the second one was that agricultural policy and spatial planning are not connected. And those are really basic things. I mean, it reminds me a little bit of myself and some of our colleagues here were architects, and it's kind of crazy that you can talk about something which deals with space, like food growing does, and yet you're not thinking about that in relation to the agricultural policy, that these groups aren't talking together. So, I mean, that's a fundamental and basic problem. The other point that came up was that actually what's important in all of that, probably overriding that, is this idea of culture, the culture of the different professions, how we work together, how we each have our own particular view, and that there's a whole cultural issue about speaking together, working together, and understanding. But on the other hand, what came up as being very interesting is the way that proximity makes for richness. So the idea of agriculture in the city, in the metropolitan area, and how these things are proximate to each other, starts making for a real richness. And that's something, again, which I think a lot of us have recognized, but is a very good point to bear in mind. Something not always so easy to communicate because it's much more qualitative thing. Anyway, so that's what we were discussing yesterday. It's very interesting, very relevant, feed into what we're talking about now. If I talk a little bit now about this idea of performance and potential, I just want to talk a little bit about this Aesop group, because we've been running now for 7 years since it was initiated in Almere by a group of academics. And it's operated very effectively as a forum for bringing people together, for people to discuss things. But we're of the view now that we need to consolidate a little bit to give ourselves a bit more presence, a bit more sort of stability. So we kind of want to do that in small steps rather than pretending we can do everything very quickly, because we probably can't. But one thing is, at the moment, we don't really have a membership list. We don't have a formal kind of membership for this group, although we exist. So and we want to start putting together a more formal membership list, quite informal, but that at least we can say this is who we are, this is who we represent. So in your delegates pack, you'll all find a little form like this. And we're asking everybody who'd like to just be associated with this food group to fill it in. Just ask for name, affiliation, email, and your signature, notes if you have any notes. But the idea is we'll collect these, and Arnold van der Valk, who is our secretary for the group, will coordinate them all, and we'll just put together a fairly simple spreadsheet with everyone's names, and then we will contact everyone to ask very briefly for their particular areas of interest and website links, so that we can build up this network and we can actually represent something. And more importantly, if we want to do something, we know how to contact people. So that's one little task. If you can fill it in if you'd like to join, and then just leave it at the reception desk And then in due course, you'll receive an email back from Arnold or his team to supply a little bit more information. We want to keep it simple and manageable, but useful. And the other thing is, we have run this group, again, very informally with a steering group, which consists of chairperson, who's myself at the moment, a PhD and new researchers coordinator, who is Colleen, waving in the middle, and then Arnold, who has been doing all the secretarial work, which has been critical, actually, to keeping it together. So we want to now also structure this a little bit more, and I'm proposing that we say, for example, the chairperson role and the PhD coordinator role has a duration of 3 years, so that we can rotate and that new people can come in. And as part of that process of just setting these things up, we are going to have a meeting today after lunch for anybody who's particularly interested in that. But obviously, a lot of people will be more interested at this stage in the presentations. So Arnold and myself are also available during all of the lunches if you want to just speak to us and let us know what your ideas are, what you'd like us to kind of take forward. So that's a little bit of housekeeping. So we're going to be looking for a new secretary, a new chairperson, going to be looking for a new person to coordinate the PhD group, which is super important, that PhD group. And Arnold is happy to continue running as the secretary, which is a fundamentally important role for us. Okay, so those are some little things about how we try to move forward. The next conference is already in place, scheduled for 2016. Michael Roth is going to be running that, and it's going to be in Germany at Nürtingen Geisligen University, which is near Munich, and it runs in September, September the 22nd and the 23rd. Now, what we're interested in, of course, is the conference that happens after, and the conferences that happen after. So anybody here who is interested in hosting one of these conferences, again, let us know, because we would like to plan as far in advance as possible. So that's really what I want to say. Giuseppe is going to speak in a moment. He's going to raise another series of issues that are helpfully critical about what we're doing and how we could take things forward. But I think my sort of thought at the moment is what we're interested in doing with this group is it kind of exists informally as a sort of think tank, you might say. And the question is, can we transform it into what John Thackeray calls a think and do tank? I think we are doing a lot of the stuff informally, but if we can kind of connect it a bit more, I think it'll give us more weight and more kind of coherence. Also because a number, especially in Europe, of large projects like the cost action on urban agriculture, cost action on allotments, will be coming to an end soon. And actually, somewhere there needs to be some kind of cloud-like home for all these different groups that are basically working in the same direction. So hopefully our group could fulfill that role. Okay, so I'll leave it there and look forward to the rest of the conference.